Hey there, welcome to Board Game Hot Takes, the podcast where we give our immediate reactions to the hottest board games just minutes after playing them. My name's Tim.
And this is Chris.
This is Adam. And this week we're going to continue our coverage of TimCon. As a quick recap, we're heading into Sunday morning. I have 4 victories so far in the lead for the Golden Meeple, the coveted Golden Meeple. Chris has 1 victory, Steve has 1 victory, and Tim has a goose egg. 0 victories so far for Tim. Here's the second half of TimCon. Adam, do you mind getting us started with Smartphone Inc? Yeah, Smartphone Inc. I love this game. So this is a game designed by Ivan Lashin, published by Arcane Wonders, along with Cosmodrome Games. If you haven't heard about this game, we did a review on it earlier. Kind of an economic game. You're each a cell phone company starting in different parts of the world. You're trying to produce smartphones in this case, and then sell that product to the markets where you've placed your office buildings, and you're trying to research tech. You do all this by this cool little mechanism where you kind of have these 2 tablets and you organize them in such the way that they're overlapping between 1 and 4 squares, which also goes into your smartphone production. And anyway, the icons that are remaining are those tablets, kind of are the actions that you get to do for the rest of that round. You're going to repeat this process 5 times. You're going to do a little bit of engine building, research these techs that help you do more stuff. And then there's some area control after you place your smartphones out there. Lowest price setter gets to put their smartphones out there first. You can kind of block people if you're sharing the market. You want to get into those spaces first. There's some area control. There's high interaction, streamlined play, and this game runs pretty quickly, and I had a great time playing it. I was worried about Chris's reception to this game, not necessarily in his ballpark, at least historically. So Chris, what'd you think about Smartphone Inc?
I think everybody that has ever played this game went into it going, this is like the stupidest theme a board game has ever had. How dry could you possibly get? But I have to admit, there was a couple of big surprises over the course of the weekend where I'm like, I might actually have to get that game, and Smartphone Inc. was one of those. This game is so streamlined, so elegant, and the production, as simple as it is just so solid and pleasant to play with that it's wonderful. I mean, there's the entire play board, the main board, is 2 layers with little slots for your tokens, and that's wonderful. And the little tablets that Adam mentioned are so great. I mean, they just look so much like a little tablet. I love the irony of that, it's a board game pretending to be smartphones using a little cardboard tablet for your mechanism. And I thought that was so cool. But I had an absolute blast playing this game. It was super fun, super easy to learn. This is the kind of game that I could see busting out if I had somebody that was new to the hobby, or I wanted to introduce to it. They could have a lot of fun with it. Relatively easy teach, but heavyweight enough that you could also pull it out for a main event on game night as well. So, what did you think, Tim?
I love this game more than I ever expected it to. I love it even more than when we reviewed it, because playing with it, the physical production of it's a great physical production. It's clean, it's streamlined. We got up and playing and finished it in, I don't know, less than an hour probably. And it just plays quick, slick, easy to, smart, easy decisions, tactile. Loved it. I'll try to keep my review as streamlined as the game is and just end there.
It was your pick, Adam. What did you think?
Oh my gosh, I absolutely love this game. Played it with Sarah, I played it with you guys, I think twice. And maybe that's it. For such a seemingly dry theme, it surprisingly works, and those texts are cool. You can rearrange those texts however you want. There's a few options to make the game a little different every time you play, but even the cheesy scoreboard, I love counting by tens, moving it down. Plus, it's just, I don't know. I love everything about this game. One of my favorites.
Yeah, and Chris managed to pull in the win on this one, even though it was his first play of it. So after Smartphone, we're sitting at Adam at 4, Chris at 2, Steve at 1. I still didn't have any points at that point. The next pick was Steve's pick, which is Samurai by Chris's favorite designer, Reiner Knizia. Samurai is an older game. Steve introduced me to this game like 3 or 4 years ago, actually, and I really enjoyed it then. I played it one more time with some other group after that. So I was looking forward to coming back to it because I remember enjoying it but didn't remember the mechanisms. There's 3 types of little like totems that spread all over the islands of Japan. Everybody has the same number of different chips that either match the totems or they have little samurais on them, which count as wilds. And each of the chips also has a number. And so what you're doing is you're putting one of those hex chips around the totems on the board or anywhere on the board. They basically count towards kind of influence on the totem that it's connected to, and they can be connected to multiples. Once a totem gets completely surrounded, then it scores, and whoever has the most points that match that totem then gets to take it over to their supply. And then the game ends when one of the three types of totems is no longer on the board anymore. The way scoring works is a very clever Reiner Knizia scoring mechanism. Whoever has the most of a specific totem type gets 1 point, and there's only three types of totems, so you can imagine that there's basically the max 3 points that are going to happen. If one person has the max in two types of totems, they automatically win the game. If two people have 1 point or three do, then it's a tie among those people. And then whatever other totems they have, you just add those all up. Interesting and weird scoring. You had to make decisions about like, well, I don't care about this type of totem because I'm not trying to go for the point in that. But if I don't collect some of those and I get the point, I won't have enough points to win the tiebreaker. So some fun decisions to me. I had a great time playing it. We played it once and then ran back and played it a second time. So got 2 games out of it. It's abstract, and I think the one thing that I felt about it at the end was that you don't have a whole lot of control. You're placing your tiles, and as soon as you get close to where, if you place one more tile, there's only one spot open, then someone's going to take that tile away from you. So it ends up being a lot of like, well, I'm just going to wait until someone does this one other thing, and I'll try to bounce on top of it. And there's a couple of special tiles that let you kind of rush in and get things. After 2 plays, I don't think it's one I need to go back to regularly, but I had a good time with it. I'll play it anytime. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I had zero fun with this game, which is very different from saying this is a bad game. I mean, Reiner Knizia is an iconic game designer. I'm a little, a little tiny guy who, is a pretty recent convert to hobby gaming, but I don't enjoy this at all. When I come to board gaming from a position of I want a story, I want a cool theme, I want something that's kind of interesting and engaging. In this one, I mean, why the hell am I collecting Buddha's hats and rice cakes in feudal Japan? I mean, why? Why am I doing that? Why are they worth points? What's the point of all this? And there is no answer to that. It is abstract. It's basically like you might as well play a game of chess. It's about that that engaging from a story perspective. But then again, there's games that are elegant in ways that I really appreciate. This game is very elegant in a way that I have absolutely no interest in. So, and it was reflected in my score as well, I believe. I think I came in, we played 2 games of this, and I came in 3rd and 4th in those. So I don't know, maybe I didn't like them as much because I did so badly at them or the other way around. But one thing that I think that bothers me about this kind of a game is that it's almost mathematical. I feel like every time I'm taking a turn, there is a way for me to calculate mathematically where I increase my chances the most. And so I feel compelled to look at every single spot where I could possibly put a token at this current time and figure out the odds that somebody could hose me on that spot or on that spot, and then which one is the best and what do they have, and so how many tokens does Tim have. And so you feel compelled to go through this exercise, and after a while you're just like, my brain hurts, this sucks, I'm not having fun, why am I even doing this? So but Adam, so anyway, I'm going to stop because I probably sound like a crazy man. Adam, what did you think?
I just want to point out that Chris did follow through on that compulsion every turn as well.
Because you have to.
The second game was it just went way too long, man. It took forever. And I think maybe that was in part due Chris's permutations on the piece of, which is exactly what my dad does, even with a game like Star Wars Rebellion. He'll turn that game from what could be a 4-hour pleasant experience into a 9-hour drag. I'm like, Dad, just play a stinking card and put your guy out there. Come on. Like, it doesn't matter. You win. You know what? You win. You've attrited me. I give up. So I wanted to say that. I just wanted to give it to Chris. I just wanted to be like, Chris, you can have my pieces. Put them wherever you want. I quit.
So I should have taken longer than you didn't quite get it.
Yeah, we did. We're almost. I think Steve was there. He just didn't want to say it out loud.
Oh, he said it out loud a couple times.
That's true. Yeah, this game, it was fun to try. I'd played it once digitally, and then it was fun to get this one out there and give it a try. And yeah, I don't want to play it ever again. And that's where I sit with Samurai.
All right.
Same as you, Chris. Yeah.
Moving on. So after our 2 games of Samurai, Adam's sitting at 5 points, took another point, headed towards the lead. Chris has 2, Steve has 1, and I finally got on the board. I got my first point of the weekend with our second game of Samurai, which was also funny because Steve was so angry about that second game because it was like between him and I. And Adam takes the final point, scores the totems, and I get the last one I need to get the second point in the game, and I won the game. And Steve was so mad that you gave me the game on that one.
I think I made some bonehead play, and I totally screwed Steve over. Sorry about that, Steve.
Yeah, see, if it had been Chris playing, he would have thought through every permutation much more carefully and made sure that didn't happen.
I was at that point. I was like, I think Steve even told me where to put the tile, and I was like, I'll put it here.
I kind of got the impression you were just ready to end the game. So
Tim, you're like, thank you very much. I'll take this one. Steve was so angry. That's right. Sorry again.
All right. Well, after that, then it was Chris's pick, and he picked something that he felt was going to be much more thematic than Samurai. Chris, tell us about your pick.
I was so excited to get back to a fun game. So my pick was Tapestry by Jamie Stegmaier, published by Stonemaier Games. A game that for anybody who's listened to us before, nobody's a stranger to this game. Everybody knows it. It's a great game. It's in my top 2 or 3. I love playing this one. We've talked about it, I think, several times on the show, so I'm not going to go into any great detail other than to say that it's a game where there are 4 tracks. You move up, and you're building a civilization. There's a technology track, a science track, a military track, and an exploration track. Each space along the track gives you benefits, and you work your way up, try to build your civilization, and then at the end, the player with the most points from optimizing their civilization wins. And I love this game. I don't think I've ever had a bad time playing this game. And the production, I think, always gives me a thrill because it's one of the few games that just comes with this box full of pre-painted minis. They're buildings that you place on your player board. And it's just such a nice tactile experience. Andrew Bosley's art is a lot of fun to look at. The pieces are beautiful. I mean, this is a game that we've, as a group, played a whole bunch of times. And I feel like, Adam, you may be the one of the bunch that's played it the least frequently, I think. What was your impression of it?
I just don't... This game never quite clicks for me. This game, I thought I was doing well for once. I thought my faction... Oh, they had this little expansion where I got to place this, like, digital recording studio out on my mat. And I was like, oh, that seems cool. Thought I optimized my faction pretty well. I was going up the explore track. I made it to space. Man, I gotta even get to do my second space tile. This is rad. I'm gonna totally win. And then boom, I take my final income and you guys still have like 8 actions left. And I'm like, oh no. So that's not a good sign when you guys still have 8 to 12 more actions. It's just never clicked for me. I don't know if I get any kind of thrilling sense out of it. I kind of go through the motions, and I don't know. I could take or leave Tapestry, to be honest with you. So that's how I feel about it. What about you, Tim? How'd this game work for you?
Yeah, if I remember though, you crushed Steve. Steve had like the worst. I don't think he ever broke 100 points. That was a rough.
Oh, Steve did just like shot himself in the foot 12 times. Each toe was gone. He has an extra toe that he shot off too. So
you didn't end up that far behind me. You like, we had a few more actions after you, but you know, when you get to the end of the game, you're playing like 3 resources for an action, and so you kind of burn through those resources pretty quickly. Chris had a really solid game, but he only ended up like 10 points above us, and I ended up like 5 points above you. So it was actually a fairly close game. I always enjoy this game, and I've liked every play of it, and I would say this was probably my least favorite play. And I think it's because it's the first time I played it 4 players. I'm not sure why that changed it that much, because I always find it to be a really engaging and fun game at 2 or 3 players. And maybe it's just that much more time around the table. Maybe that's all it is. Like, there is some decent interaction in the game. It's not super frequent, but there's enough to keep you engaged with what people are doing, and you're racing up the tracks from each other. But adding a 4th person in the extra time just seemed to slow it down just enough to where it went over that peak of being fun to playtime. You know, it kind of lost its momentum there. I still had fun with it. I still had a great time playing with this new civilization. We played with the Plans and Plays expansion. Play it any time. So had a good time with it, but it was, and also I think we were getting like to the point in the weekend where we were all getting a little exhausted and brains were tired, and playing this game where you really have to think through and make the right decision every time for a game that I wasn't super excited to play that night. I was looking forward to some other things. I was kind of at a point where I was too tired to start to really care that much and get too excited about the competition of it. I really wanted to be just exploring new games. And so I was kind of just looking on to the next game at that point, but still had fun with it.
So basically, it was a really good choice for me.
Well, speaking of games that don't require a lot of brain effort and energy, I think the next pick was yours, Tim.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Chris did end up winning that, as we mentioned. So that put him at 3 points. He's catching up on Adam a little bit in the scoring. We go into the next game, which I pick, and that is a team game. So whoever walks out of this next game is, 2 people are going to get a point out of it. I'm like, this is my chance. I'm going to get something out of this. But we played Cerebria. Cerebria is published by Mindclash Games, and it's designed by Richard Amon and Victor Peter. I talked about this in a lot of detail a couple weeks ago, but I was the only one that talked about it because I played it without these guys, and so I really wanted them to play it. I thought everyone would really enjoy the experience of it, and I had a lot of fun with it. Just a couple notes, and I want to hear what you guys have to say about it, because, by the way, listeners, we kind of intentionally don't talk a whole lot about the games we've been playing because we kind of save our thoughts for the podcast. So I heard some brief thoughts from everybody. I don't really know what these guys thought about the gameplays until we're talking here, so I'm excited to hear about that. But a couple notes. First, it was really easy to teach. For all the complaints I had about how hard it was to learn the game, I think it took me 10 minutes to teach this. And I had to go back and remind a couple of rules through the game. And I'd like to hear what you guys think about how you felt about learning it from somebody. But it was way easier to get into and a lot more accessible than I thought it was going to be. The game is still bizarre enough, though, that it did take me a couple rounds to remember what are the motivations here. Me and Adam were playing on the same team. We were playing as the Bliss side, and we had a really terrible start. Steve and Chris ran away with the first 5 points, and then we got one little chip in there, and they had another 5 points, and it was it seemed impossible for us to catch up at that point. But we did. We turned it around, and we managed to have a couple huge turns. So it took a little bit to get into it, but I really enjoyed, again, the decisions and working through and figuring out how to put this puzzle together and try to best the other team. I had fun with it. Chris, what about you? What do you think of Cerebria first play?
Well, first of all, it was great fun teaming with Steve where we were misery and hatred. I was hatred and he was misery, and I felt like we were able to really sort of lean into those parts. I thought that worked really well.
Didn't really have to change anything about your personalities and take those.
No. It's I just be myself, and there you go. Now this game, it was interesting. I actually had some expectations about it because Tim had spoken so highly of it in one of our previous episodes, and so I had some idea of Tim's impression of it. One of the things he talked about was the beautiful production, and I will back that 100%. I mean, the production is amazing. The board is the size of a kitchen table, which I think is so cool. There's painted minis, or at least his version had painted minis. I know it's not necessarily the case if you buy the production version now, but all the pieces to this game are absolutely beautiful. We haven't played a whole lot of team games, and so that was a new experience for me. And I thought that part of it was fun, in particular, kind of hashing through the different, options that you may have and really putting your heads together. The number of times that Steve would say something and I'd be like, oh crap, you're right. No, that's absolutely makes sense. But there's enough going on that it takes 2 brains to really kind of, lean into this and get the answers right. The thing is, though, it didn't click with me the way that I was hoping it was going to. And I don't know if that had to do with the fact that it was a team game and not just an individual game, or something about the rules. The theme of this one was engaging the different parts of a personality, but that didn't, to me, seem incredibly representative of the game itself. I mean, you're moving around this big circle and trying to do area control, and there were parts of it that I really enjoyed. There were parts of it that I was kind of mediocre on. By the end of it, I found myself saying it was a really good experience. I had a lot of fun, but it didn't quite live up to what I was hoping for after hearing Tim talk so highly about it. So, Adam, what did you think? Because it was your first play as well.
Yeah, I'm kind of right there with you. It didn't necessarily click. Maybe I feel like I didn't totally understand everything that was going on. I had Tim there who had played it a couple times before, and he was kind of helping me out, running me through the things. It didn't quite click. It was hard for me to parse the board. I could see clearly the areas in one region were kind of clearly defined by the pathway, and then there's this other little triads or whatever they're called that were it wasn't easy for me to parse. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to look at to see the game state. So I never was quite sure what was going on. There is a lot going on. So it didn't help that I didn't really totally understand. And I think there's a lot to explore there. One thing to note, the game went surprisingly quicker than I thought. So the two minds kind of collaborate. There's almost a scoring on every like third turn. I think there was a potential for someone to score. And that's kind of how it went. There was that first one that kind of slipped. I think I made a bonehead move and you guys scored right after I went. And then it was just every third person right there. So you're trying to either mitigate how many points they could get. I don't know. I don't know what to think about this one. It was interesting. I definitely wouldn't say I loved it. I wouldn't mind playing it again, just to see if anything else sinks in or if something more clicks. But that's kind of where I'm at with it right now. Tim, how was this play for you?
A couple things that stood out to me with this particular play, and one was that everything became a lot more obvious to me this time. Like if the first couple turns, I was getting back into it and trying to teach everybody and watch what you guys were doing. But then once we got after our first couple turns, I was kind of like, okay, I can clearly see that if they do this and this, they're going to take this from me. And I think this game will take a couple plays to really be able to get deep into the strategy and play competitively from what I can see. Never mind the fact that me and Adam still lost, even though I was saying that I understood what was going on. Part of that was because I would be like, hey, Chris and Steve, just in case you guys didn't see this, go check this little thing over here because you might have missed that, because I could see that it wasn't obvious. And I'm not saying that I gave the play away.
No, you totally did. That's the first thing you said to me was like they could get points.
Oh.
They could get points right here, and I was like, well, should we tell them? Like, I don't think that's cool to keep a secret from them. So I was like, hey, Tim just pointed out that I didn't want to like keep me. I was like, Tim pointed out you guys get points like this and blah blah blah. And then I think even at the end I was like, dude, you guys could put the cap on and win the tiebreaker. And I think you guys were there or would have gotten there anyway. But it was, I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Maybe you guys are hatred and misery.
I didn't think that the team play worked as well as I was hoping it was going to be with our group. It was fun, but I think we all probably prefer to just kind of do our own game and play on our own and make our own decisions. So maybe the right group would do better with. I asked Adam as we were halfway through the game waiting for Chris and Steve to take their turn, and I was like, do you think this is best at a 4-player? Or would you rather just play a 2-player? It's like, I think I'd rather just play a 2-player, on the own side. And I don't disagree with that, and I think it could be really fun that way. So I'm going to dig into this some more with some different player counts and different groups and see how other people feel about it. But I didn't get as much fun working through the team experience on this one as I had last time. It just felt like I kind of wanted to just be making my own decisions and not have to bounce things off Adam and not have to feel like I was telling him what to do or whatever. So I feel like it didn't hold up from that perspective.
I think it might help if they were same level. Like you were up here and I was definitely down here, and you're like, Adam, look at this and this and this and this. I was like, oh my God, I didn't see any of that.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm not helping you at all.
Yeah.
But I feel like if we were both here and I'd be like, oh dude, what about this? What about this? What about this? And we could,
Right.
Kind of elevate each other rather than me drag you down. I feel like that would be a better experience.
Yeah, I agree. One thing that someone told me after I played last time and talked about it is that there was an expansion. You can get an expansion that goes up to 6 players. And the 5th and 6th players have their own team, and their team is balance. And Balance's whole goal is that when the game ends, that the other 2 players are exactly tied for points, and then
nice.
Balance wins if the other teams are tied for points. And so apparently they can do, obviously they can do things to like set it up for the player that's behind and stuff like that. I think that's an interesting concept. I don't know if it'd be fun to play with that many people on this game and deal with that. Kind of a fun idea. Anyway, I still think this game's really clever. I'm still going to keep, digging away at it, but we'll have to see if I can find the right group or right person to play much. I might dig into the solo mode some more. Now that I really have a grasp on the game, I feel like I can understand everything that I need to be doing. I want to dig into the solo mode will be a little bit easier to run, I think, and that might be fun for me too. Chris edged up a little bit higher here. Got to 4 points. Steve's sitting at 2 now. And Adam, we played your pick next.
All right, the game that I wanted to pick and get to the table next is called Shamans. And that's a game by Cedric Chabousset and Maud Chalmel. In this, it's kind of a trick-taking game, but not really. And it's also a social deduction game. So again, this is another one I was worried about when I said the cursed words to Chris. Chris is a trick taker. And his reaction was, oh, and I think he gagged a little bit. But we got it out. I did a sloppy teach on it. Pretty simple to teach. We had 4 players. The first thing you do is you deal out the Shamans and Shadow cards. So it's kind of, you have different goals, right? If you're the Shamans, you're trying to expose the Shadow and use your little knife card to chop them up. And if you're the shadow, you're trying to get this token down to the moon. And if you get it down to the moon, then you get more points than the shamans. And if the shamans expose the shadow, then they get the points. The first player starts, they play this color of card, and it's numbered 1 through 6. So if they play a green card, then if somebody doesn't play a green card, then the token marches towards the moon, which arouses suspicion that that person might be the shadow. But if they do play a green card, you know, okay, everything's good, we're moving around the table. Next guy plays, okay, so maybe it's the lowest green card, they get to grab a token. Whoever played the highest green card gets to wrangle up all the cards and play the next card. And the game goes around and around and around. You get these tokens. Once one of the suits fills up, so all 6 numbers from a suit or a color of card have filled up, you get to execute whatever that suit provides. So it could be moving that little token 1 away from the moon. It could be give yourself a point. It could be grab a token. Or if you have this little dagger token in your hand, you get to choose someone to expose. So maybe I think Chris is the shadow. Boom, I'm going to use my little dagger token and execute him. If he's the shadow, great. All the shamans win. If he's a shaman, then the token marches down towards the moon, however many cards he has left in his hand. So there's some really interesting dynamics that come out of this. There's some really good table talk that came out of this. I had a great time playing this game. I'm glad you guys tried it with me. It's kind of something different for a group than we usually do. Tim, what do you think of Shamans?
I love this game. The more we've distanced from it, and I've been thinking about it, this is probably the standout game for me this weekend, as far as the one that I think I want to go back to, and I really loved, and I'm glad we explored it. First of all, the production on this game is beautiful, and you won't find a game in a box this size, a little trick-taking game that has anything nearing this type of production. It's just got amazing artwork. This little board that it's got has this foil like pop out kind of shiny stuff on it, so it just looks really like spot UV stuff. But the mechanisms are fantastic. It is just a trick-taking game generally, but it's got just enough added layers on it to really keep it interesting. And what I started to realize by the end of the second game is that you really have a lot of control about how much you're helping the shamans or how much you're trying to stop them, and you can do it without giving stuff away. But also there's layers on the strategy. Like in the last game we played, or the last hand we played, I was the shadow, and somebody identified it right away. I forget what it was, but right away somebody like made me turn over my card at like the first turn, and I was a shadow, so everyone knew it. So I was like, well, how am I going to win this game? But I started to notice that I could stop you guys from triggering the dagger elements by holding back the one card you needed to finish that set. Or if I finished it, then I was going to be the one that got to swing the dagger. So I actually had a lot more control than I thought, and I managed to like hold on. We're getting right down to the last round, and it looks like I'm going to be able to finish it as the shadow. And then Chris plays the card that swaps personalities with me. He takes the shadow from me and gives me the shaman so he can get the victory on it. But then I've got the cards in my hand that let me finish out the dagger thing. So I was able to use the card that I was holding on to then finish him off. So it was great. This game is a lot of fun. The way you get points, it doesn't play long. Usually after a few hands, somebody wins it. You usually only get a couple points per hand. But there are also some little mechanisms that let you get other points, which just adds another layer of like, you know, you're shamans, you're all working together, but you're kind of not, because you don't want the person who's in the lead in points to get a couple more points this turn. And so you might try to take them out so they're not eligible for points. A lot of great layers on this. For, you know, I like taking games anyway. I don't like hidden trader games. That's the one last thing I'll say about it, is that just played mechanically, I thought this is going to be great, but that's not the way our group plays, you know. So of course right away Steve and Adam start like, oh, you're the shadow, aren't you, and like pointing at you, and like, I'm not the shadow, what are you talking about? And who knows what the hell Adam's doing. I learned that Adam's like a complete psychopath, because he's just constantly going against his own good, against his teammates' good. Who knows what's going on there. That was a little stressful for me. I don't really like hidden trader games where you have to like lie and hide who you are. But I kind of got over that at the end. I'm never going to be good at it, but I think this game allows you, even if you're known as the shadow, to get away with, you know, still an opportunity to win, and that makes it okay. That if people want to play that way, you guys were clearly having a lot of fun doing that, and I didn't even mind. So this is a really great game. It's one that I hadn't heard about until Adam introduced us to. So if you haven't heard about it and you like trick taking at all, you should definitely check this out. You have to play with 4 players.
You can play 3, 4, or 5. I think 5 might be the max.
I'd love to try it at 5, because Adam said it adds 2 shadows in at 5, and that seems really fun too. More mystery going on there. But yeah, this was a really fun game. I would love to play it anytime. I was even thinking maybe some night we do this online and do a full review of it, talk about it some more. What about you, Chris? What do you think of Shamans?
When when Adam said trick taking game, I think I vomited in my mouth a little bit because I hate trick taking games. I don't like traditional card games. The last time we played a trick taking game was Capital Lux 2 back last November, I believe, and I hated that. And so I went into this with an extremely negative attitude, and holy cow, what a surprise this game was. I'm with you, Tim. I think this is the surprise standout of the weekend. Maybe a close second was Smartphone Inc. But this is a game that I expected to really dislike, and I absolutely had a blast. And I think part of that had to do with the fact that where Capital Lux 2 piled on the heavy math and the strategy with the cards, this game replaced that with some really great theme in the social deduction, a very light social deduction. And I thought that made all the difference in the world. And to me these days, when I think about what games belong in my collection, one of the things I'm thinking about is how often am I going to get it to the table? And this is the kind of game that if my wife and I had another couple over who weren't gamers, I could whip this out. It's familiar enough to anybody who's, this style to anybody who's played any kind of trick-taking card game, euchre or whatever. You could take that out and people will be impressed by the way it looks. It looks cool. It's simple to play. You have four, six suits, whatever it was, cards numbered 1 to 6, the tokens, a few point cards and ability cards, and it just all flows together in this like really neat package. And similar to what you said, Tim, I spent the rest of the weekend thinking about this game, and I think I'm gonna have to pick a copy of it up. In fact, I may do it this weekend just because I need to have this in my collection. So I had so much fun with it. The other thing was I learned that if you're ever playing a social deduction game with Tim, just ask him if he's the bad guy. If he starts giggling, he's the bad guy. It's that easy.
I told you I'm terrible at it, but also I'm telling you, if you asked me that, even if I wasn't, I'd still start giggling.
That's probably true.
Hey, I did have one little negative on this game though, and that is that I don't think it's very colorblind friendly, and it was very hard for us to be able to differentiate the colors. There are little symbols on the cards that tell you what suit they're in. They were very not visible, so we oftentimes were putting cards on the wrong row, and just a minor thing, but it made it a little challenging to play sometimes. It was minor. It was still really good, but I think if somebody had more challenge discerning colors, this could be pretty rough.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I noticed that as well.
Well, I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. I'm glad I enjoyed it. I hadn't played this one, so thanks for playing it with me. It was freaking awesome. I'm glad we got this one out.
So that wrapped up Sunday. So we had one more day. We were here till Monday evening is when Chris and I were going to leave. So we had just a couple more games we were going to get out of the way. So game number 21 for the whole weekend was Steve's pick, and that was Outlive, published by Le Boy de Joux. Outlive is a post-apocalyptic theme, but basically it's a kind of a resource management game where you're trying to build up your shelter, collect survivors into your shelter, make sure you can feed them. And it's played over 6 rounds. Every player has 4 characters out on the board, and they have numbers. There are 2 3s, a 4, and a 5. So what happens is that you can move any character up to 2 spaces around, and the board is kind of like a big rondel, so you can either go to the right or to the left. And when you move 1 to 2 spaces away, you land on that spot, and depending on what number is on your character, you get that many resources from that spot. But if there's another player there with a lower number, then you can put pressure on them equal to the difference between your numbers. They have to give you a resource or use an ammo. Each of you has your own little player board that has slots for these different rooms you can build in your fallout shelter. So everybody starts with 4 standard rooms and then 4 randomly selected rooms at the beginning of the game that all do kind of different engine building things. So you have to build those by spending some resources, and then you get the access to them. You can start sending people to them. But it's pretty punishing too, in that at the end of each round, you have to use water or these food resources you can pick off the board to pay your survivors, otherwise they die. It's a really tight board. The resources are limited. Every round you set up with just a limited number of resources depending on the players. So it can be very hard to do that, very punishing. There's a few other mechanisms going on, including one that's an event. At the beginning of each round, you turn over an event, and it's usually a negative effect for everybody at the table. And so there's an opportunity for players to solve those events by collecting and spending resources. That's a general idea of how to play. Adam, it's your first play. What do you think of Outlive?
I will say at this point in the weekend, my brain was getting a little cooked. I was having a little trouble keeping up. I didn't enjoy this game at all. I felt like I couldn't do anything. It'd be my turn. There's no water left. Okay, great. My guys are going to die. I can go explore around in this thing, find some empty cupboards, and not get anything out of it except for a bullet and a microchip, and my guys are going to die. I can go try to hunt some food over here and get 3 pieces of meat, and that's enough to feed 2 of my 8 guys, and my guys are going to die. I can go to this thing and get some canned food over here, and then I can use 3 things of canned food, and my guys are going to die. So, I don't know. If you like watching your guys die and not being able to do anything, this is absolutely the game for you.
Way to sell it, Adam.
No, it was tough for me. There's all these rooms. Anybody build all their rooms in their thing? Like, why is there 7 rooms if you can only build 3 of them? Why? I don't know. I just one of these Euro games where I constantly felt like I couldn't get anything done. And didn't matter what I do, I was never getting ahead of the game. I was always behind, trying to catch up. Didn't give me a good feeling. Chris, how did you like this game?
This is my game. I love this game. This is one of the first games that Tim and I ever played together, and it has a place in my heart. But I also just really enjoyed the game, and I'd be curious to hear your take after a second game of this or a third game of this, if you ever feel compelled to do that. Because one of the interesting things about this is that Steve commented that he played this first game of Outlive and didn't like it. And then kind of wanted to come back and tried it again, and then really liked the game. And I sort of felt the same way. The first time I tried it, I'm like, this is the most unwieldy, overly complicated game that I've ever played. But I liked the theme. That was enough to pull me back in. And then I got to the second game, and I felt like I was hooked on it. So, maybe not. Maybe you try it and you'd feel just as bad the second time as you did the first time, because all the things you said I completely get. I mean, those are all legitimate complaints about the game, and that can be extremely frustrating. But I'd be curious to hear, if we ever get the opportunity to play it again, what your reaction to that would be.
Yeah, I don't think I gave it a fair shake at all. My mental state was beleaguered. I just didn't have the mental effort to put into it, I'll say. Tim, how'd this play go for you?
I loved it. I loved this play, and this is my first time playing 4 players.
Yeah, me too.
I think I've played it at 3 players several times, and I thought it was awesome. 4 is super tight. It is a punishing game, and there were several times when I lost guys, and I never want to do that, but you just got to do the best you can and work up and fix some equipment so you can do a little bit better next time and add some rooms that are better. I mean, I've probably played this game 8 times so far, and the game still has a couple fiddly things that are hard to, like, it has slightly overcomplicated rules that should have been developed down a little bit. Some of the rules about, that your room can only be used once, except if it's this type of room. If it applies to the board and the equipment, it's not clear whether you can use it once or use it multiple times. And the order of feeding people versus checking radiation, and how many people do you have to have in your airlock so you don't get radiation in. Like, all of that stuff, it just seems like a chore to track and keep up with, and especially teaching. Like, I was trying to help Adam through it, and it just felt like I was spending so much of my mental energy trying to help him understand this game, and not because Adam's dumb. But I mean, I'm not saying he isn't, but that's not the reason in this case. No, but it was just that even for my own sake, it wasn't easy to explain it, and it wasn't clear to get across. So I think this game has always struggled from that. I also didn't like my first play of it. I played this years ago, but it was a game that I thought was kind of entertaining, interesting in a way, so I wanted to go back to it, and I've loved every play since then. My first play, I felt like it was punishing. I felt like I couldn't grasp some of the timing rules. And then at the end, the scoring came together, and I was like, well, I don't even know how I just won that. I don't know what happened there. But the game has clear paths to victory, and I really love it. I will go back to it anytime. It's unfortunate you didn't have a good time with it, Adam. I'm glad we got a chance to play it.
I think one of the things that lost it for me, too, is there isn't much interaction. You can pressure. I think I got pressured twice in the game, and I threw out a couple. I had, like, for whatever reason, I had, like, 12 microchips. So I just was like, here you go, take a microchip, and you take a microchip.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess someone could take all the water before you get there, and then your guys are going to die. So it's parallel play, very much parallel play, except the guys take stuff from you, and then you're just screwed.
Yeah, it's a amount of interaction like a worker placement game is, basically. It's you're blocking spaces, and that's about it.
Taking resources. Chris, what were you going to say?
Basically just like real life in a post-apocalyptic world. But Tim, this is actually, you've talked before about thematic Euros and how you enjoy them. Mind Clash is a good example of those types of games. And this really feels to me like that. It's very thematic, so it feels. I mean, it's not area control in any way, but that whole the vibe of it feels thematic and science fictiony and very immersive in that sense. But it really is ultimately a worker placement game,
Yeah.
and so it makes me that's what it makes me think of.
Yeah, the one other place of interaction is the like race to those event cards, and I think that's hard to see on an early play how important they are because the points are not that high here. So if you can get some of those, it's pretty important. And so it tends to be a real race for like, okay, I've got to get the resource. Oh, I can see he's collecting those resources, so maybe I need to ignore that and go for something else. So it's there, but it's a euro, for sure. That it's not going to be heavier interaction.
I can see in a post-apocalyptic world, I'm going to have to rely on the charms of my traveling bard skills and latch on to one of the stronger factions of you guys and trying to make you guys laugh and get some water from you.
Well, just remember in the post-apocalyptic future, if you need any water, get a few microchips. You're good to go.
Concrete thematic linkage makes total sense.
And so, by the way, in a surprising upset now, Chris, after Outlive, his win at Outlive, took the lead in the championship. And Adam was sitting at 5 points, Chris is at 6, Steve's at 2, and I'm still at 2. And we're pretty much set to just have one more game for the weekend.
But actually, I think we failed to mention that in Shamans, we actually had 2 games we played of that. And one of them, the first one was my victory. The second one was Tim's. And so that's how Tim got that second win, and I got that extra one under my belt as well going into Sunday, or Monday at this point.
Yeah, apparently the only way I can win a game is if we play it 2 games in a row. Then I can actually play the second one well. Because both times that I won a point this weekend, we did that with. Coming in to the final game of the weekend, the game that I wanted to get played the most this weekend was Anachrony. Steve and Chris, I thought they were both going to like it. It was actually Chris's pick, but Chris is like, well, Tim's been wanting to get this played, so I'm going to play this. So we got Anachrony out on the table, set everything up. Teach on this was a little bit longer than Cerebria. There are a little like rules you got to teach, but I felt like even with all those rules, everything's clearly spelled out. There wasn't really any confusion about how to play the game once we got into it. And yeah, I had another great time with it. I think I was exhausted, and it was a lot of mental work to get through this game, but I still love it. Great to get back to it. Chris, what about you? It's your first play of Anachrony. What do you think of it?
Well, it was like, bam, like mind blown. I mean, this game was huge. This game was kind of the opposite of Smartphone Inc. and Shamans, where I had zero expectations, in fact, negative expectations coming in for those games and was blown away by them. This one suffered from the fact that I had such high expectations because it's this huge production, big game, giant box full of amazing components, mind clash, high production values. But in the end, I think this game actually lived up to some of the hype. I really enjoyed this game. It was complex, and it was complex in a lot of ways that I thought seemed, potentially over complex on the first play. But even by the end of the first game, I felt like if I played this again, it'd be smooth as silk. This game, essentially what you're trying to do is you're using your worker placement to populate exosuits that are going to do various actions for you in this central city in a dystopian future, where you also have the opportunity to travel back in time to steal resources or borrow resources from the past. You have to pay them back. But essentially, it's a relatively complex worker placement game. An interesting twist to it was that about 2/3 of the way through the game, or 2/3 of the way through the levels at least, the rounds, you have a catastrophic event. And after the catastrophic event, the capital city is destroyed, and then everybody has to evacuate the capital, and then you're racing to be the first one out of the capital. But at the same time, you also don't want to evacuate too fast because there's still points that can be scored and things that you can do in the meantime to try to build up your points in a little bit of your engine building before you evacuate the city. And so there's a lot of tension there. And overall, I found this game super engaging, a lot of fun. It takes about a half hour to set it up, but overall, I was really excited by it. I think, Tim, you had brought 2 big ass box games to the table this weekend. One of which was Cerebria, and the other one was Anachrony. Cerebria, I found myself a little bit let down. Anachrony, I thought, brought the goods. I really had a good time with this game. Adam, this is also your first time playing it. No, this wasn't your first time playing, was it? You actually, in fact, you own this game, didn't you? Now that I think about it.
That's right. I own this game. I sold it to Tim back in April when I went out to Tim's place, and we played it there a couple times. And this game, yeah, going into it, I was exhausted. I was a grumple up, I guess, and it was just hard for me to get into. But thinking back on it, like, I want to play it again. I want to be that same faction. I want to try to use that faction better because now I know how it can kind of work. There's just so much here to explore, and you realize all the things you could have done. There is the same kind of confounding aspects to me of the worker placement stuff. Well, oh great, you took my spot, the only spot that I needed, and now I can't do this thing that I was building up for the whole last 2 rounds. Okay, cool. So that's maybe that same effect that Tim gets from Eclipse is something that happens to me in some of these resource building games where like I built for this whole thing this whole time and now I can't do it. So, and it's not because of other players, it's because of the way that the system of the game was designed. So that gets a little frustrating to me. But at the same time, I don't care. This game's so cool, and the different factions are so cool, and I realize now, like, more stuff I could do. You mentioned it, Chris, this whole catastrophe comes. I like the whole idea that you're trying to build up your own city and give your workers spots to go to, like, potentially when after this catastrophe comes, they don't even need to go out to the capital and collect stuff. They can just go in your own city and can generate all the resources you might need doing it that way. Like the whole going back in time and repaying your loans or repaying yourself back in the past and getting points for that. So just some very neat mechanisms. I was a exhausted grump playing this one, but it's still a great game. I want to play it again. Yeah, that's how I feel about it. Tim, how'd this play go for you?
I liked it a lot. I was also tired and exhausted, and it felt a little bit. What actually surprised me about it is that the first couple of rounds we're going through, and I was like, oh, this is going to take forever. Now I wish I hadn't picked it, but it actually went pretty quickly. There's 4 rounds before the catastrophe and up to 3 after that, and I feel like we got this knocked out in like an hour and a half or 2 hours with 4 of us playing. Like it actually went pretty rapid. I was surprised by it. Chris is saying 3 hours, but it was a pretty long teach. In any case, it didn't feel like it dragged on as I was getting into it. So I enjoyed it. Every decision is important in here. I made a lot of mistakes on my game, and that was frustrating to me. And part of that was just being tired and trying to watch everybody else's boards and make sure everyone was playing. not missing rules because I just taught it. And so it wasn't an optimal play for me, but I had a lot of fun with it. I always want to play this. This is what I call my number 1 game of all time. It's still sitting right up there. Like after this weekend, I'm thinking maybe Terraforming Mars moved back up because I always have a wonderful play of that. But this is a game I want to keep going back to. I think it suffers from a lot of worker placement games, and that it's starting to feel like that mechanism is so tired at this point. It's so overused. But this has so many layers on it, and it's very tight, and there's a lot of other stuff going on. You can build up your own buildings and kind of use your workers in different ways, and the whole exhaustion mechanism, how that all worked, and how different workers are better at different locations. The players are so asymmetric with their scoring goals. For a worker placement game, this is the best. There isn't anything else that's as good as this that I've ever played. But it is heavy enough that it may not be the only one I ever want to go back to because, sometimes you just don't want to put that much brain power into something. But I want a heavy game. This is still my number 1. I still loved it. It was a lot of fun. Steve seemed to really like it. He said he was going to try to buy it as soon as we finished the game. So he clearly had a good time with it. So yeah, that's how I felt about it. I think one of the things I learned from this weekend is that there were times every day where people were just kind of like starting to get burnt out from playing heavy games, and then we go to a light game and have a great time with it. Games that we normally wouldn't have picked for like our game night focus. And I think we would have benefited from making sure that there was a little bit more of a blend there. Not play several heavy games in a row, but play a heavy game and then play a fun, light, quick experience where people can just have a good time and not just sit there and stare at their board and think for 3 hours. So that's one thing I learned from this weekend. So Chris ended up winning this game as well. Chris was on like a super roll the last 2 days of the week, took home the championship trophy. So congrats, Chris. Shocked us all. How do you feel?
I feel pretty good about it, especially because I think if there's one thing that everybody would agree on at the beginning of this weekend is Chris is not going to win. And yet there we go. And there we are. So I proudly have my TimCon trophy placed on the shelf in my game room. I actually took a lot of pride in the fact that I showed it to my non-gamer son, and he looked at it and said, "Oh, that's a giant meeple." I said, "Oh man, you are my son." That felt pretty good.
There's one more game. We kind of scored the championship and everything there, but Chris had about half an hour more before we had to take him to the airport. And so we did get to play a couple of games of the Mind. I just did want to get Adam's thoughts really quick on that because this was your first play of it, Adam. What do you think of the Mind?
Holy cow, I had so much fun playing that game. What a great, light, little mix-up, intriguing game of... It's just fun. It's just cool the way it goes. I didn't know what to expect totally going in. I heard some things. I didn't quite know how it would play out. But it was entertaining. I had such a great time playing. I'm glad you guys introduced me to the Mind. And before we do wrap up, I got some questions for you guys. Is there any games that didn't make it to the table that you wish had made it to the table?
There was a few in the piles. I just picked up Paladins of the West Kingdom. And Friday morning before Chris got there, and I was the first one awake in the morning, I put it all out and I learned the game and I was ready to teach it. And it actually looks really fun to me, really intriguing. But there were other games of that weight that I wanted to get to more, and I didn't want to bog things down with having to teach a game that I didn't know that well, so I never ended up going to it. I would have liked to get that played. I wanted to get Kemet played. I wasn't really dying to, but I would have liked to have one more play of that, especially the in-person production. So it would have been fun to have that on the table one time. I think those are the two that I was mostly thinking about. What about you, Adam?
I think Kemet for sure was one. I wanted to get the in-person play and take a second look at it after that first play for sure. Battle for Rokugan, that would have been fun to get to the table with the little chit building. I don't want to say it's like Samurai, but you have that same draw, the chits from a pile behind your screen, then you're putting them out there on the map, and then you kind of reveal them, and that's kind of exciting how those all come out, and it's kind of like bluffing this and that. I'm sure there's more and more. We never got to do an Imperium in person. We play that all the time anyway, but it's a good enough mod.
Yeah.
That's a lot of area control, though. I was happy to mix it up and get the different variety in there for sure. Anything, Chris, that you wanted to play that didn't make it out?
Well, you guys said a couple of them already. Kemet is one. I would have loved to play Kemet. In fact, the last game was my choice, and we sort of talked about it as a group, and we played Kemet before. We hadn't played Anachrony. Tim really wanted to get that on the table. I wanted to get it on the table. We hadn't really played it, so we did Anachrony. But Kemet was also in there as in the running for the last game too. Lost Ruins of Arnak. I mean, that's one. We played it one time. I played it with Tim and Adam. I don't think you weren't in on that game. That was me and Tim and Steve. A super fun game. I know it's one of Tim's favorites right now, and I would have loved to have played the hard copy of that. Yeah, Dune Imperium is another one that would have been a great opportunity to get it on the table, but just not enough hours in the day, dude. Not enough hours in a 4-day weekend.
Yeah, well, I got another question for you guys. Was there any big disappointment this weekend? A game that you were looking forward to and it kind of let you down?
Just what I've said about Outlive and how it seems like everybody has a little bit of a bitter taste after a first play, but I wouldn't call it a disappointment. It was just my brain was dead at the time. It didn't quite click for me. I just missed a little bit of it on that first play.
I would say for me, the only game that was disappointing just because I did have high expectations, that was Dominant Species. I didn't know what to expect. It played pretty much what I had read about it and heard about it, and I think it had a lot of interesting stuff going on to it, but I didn't really have that much fun while playing it. I found it to be a little bit... I don't know what I found it to be, but I didn't have much fun with it. What about you, Chris? Anything that was disappointing or just... I know there's a couple you hated, but...
Yeah, not really. I mean, I had no expectations of Samurai, and they lived up to those no expectations. So, but the pleasant thing was that there was a number of games we played this weekend that completely busted my expectations in a good way. So just going back over the list here, The Expanse, I had a great time with that. I'd love to play that one again. Aquatica, I might actually buy that one because I think it's such a fun game. Smartphone Inc. Never thought that I'd like that, and that's another one that I may pick up because it's just such a fun experience. In Shamans, I never saw that one coming. A trick-taking game? I mean, I am almost ashamed of myself saying that I would buy a trick-taking game, but there you go, and I had a great time playing it. In Anachrony, if I had a bank loan and $1,000 to spend, and I can get that big box, maybe, but maybe someone will will it to me in there.
You gonna take Tim out?
That's not what I meant, but
oh, okay.
But Tim, if you do have a will, you leave that. Leave me an acronym.
It'll be in my will, I promise. Adam, what about you? Anything that really blew your expectations?
I think Shamans. I'm gonna echo that theme. I hadn't really played it. I'd messed around with it a little bit and taken it out of the box, but I'm glad it landed. It landed for me too. That game was fantastic and so smooth and quick to get out. Scythe. I think I'd never had the real full experience with Scythe. We had played that on Steam, I think, the digital implementation, it was fine, but having your whole production, Tim, that you have with the metal mechs and the factory and the modular board and those new factions, it was just cool. And just the mindset everybody was in going into that game. The art drew me in. I like how we all, once we had the encounter cards, we did like whoosh and then flashed it up and kind of showed and brought it in like, wait, give it back. I didn't get to see. Let me see that again. So it felt a little bit like story time every time one of those little, and then we all have some little dumb comment about it. Oh, it looks like this time I was in Switzerland and fell down a waterfall and broke my knee. Yeah. And so just little fun stuff like that going on in the game was just fantastic. So I think Scythe was a surprising kind of standout.
Nice.
For me.
Yeah, for me, just a couple. Yeah, I mentioned Shaman already, which I didn't have any expectations on. I was actually looking forward to it. It sounded interesting enough, but it was exceptional. It surprised me by how interesting and cool that game was. The Expanse definitely surprised me because I really didn't think I'd like that game at all because it's mostly area control and it's an ugly game. But it was just so streamlined and fun decisions every turn that I loved it. I thought it was great. And then a couple that we've played before that kind of surprised me coming back to it. Scythe, for one, just because, like I said, I have always liked that game. You go back and play the base map and you're playing with the same factions in the same places every time. And it starts to feel a little bit repetitive, a little bit, kind of scripted. And the modular board and these factions and maybe just our state of mind that night, nothing felt scripted. It felt like surprising and exciting. Every move was fun, every decision was fun, and it was fun watching that board develop. So that was great. And the last I'll just mention is Gaia Project, which I had forgotten how much I love that game. It's got good memories for me, but I had forgotten why I liked it so much, and so getting back to it was a blast to rediscover.
I see Chris shaking his head, but that's a game I'll play anytime with Tim just to see the joy that Tim gets out of it. That makes me happy to play it.
Nice. All right. Any other thoughts before we wrap up?
I mean, it was such a good time getting together with you guys. It is so good to see friends. This last year has been so hard for everybody, and just getting together with you guys is wonderful. I wish everybody that's listening to this the holiday wish that they get to spend some time with good friends playing board games and enjoy it as much as we did.
Absolutely. I want to echo that and say this was the first time I've gotten out and seen friends in a year and a half, 2 years, or whatever it's been. I made it out there in April, Tim, to hang out. But to have this group of guys together at the same place, it doesn't happen that often, especially later in life. And it was something really neat to get to do. And thanks for putting it together, and I hope we can do it again.
Yeah, totally. Well said, you guys. All right. Well, I think that'll wrap up our episode of Board Game Hot Takes. If you'd like to chat with us on social media, you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Otherwise, you can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. And looking forward to chatting with you all. Until next week, take care, everybody.
Later, guys.
Bye-bye.